Welcome everyone to a very special edition of Hagley from Home. Today we're going to have a discussion on The Great Explosion, a powder mill chronicle, a newly released children's book based on actual events at Hagley. I'm joined today by Hagley historian Lucas Clausen.
Hello.
And author Ilona Holland.
Hi everyone.
Thanks for joining us. So Ilona, for many years you taught at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. How did you draw on this experience on your next career path as a children's author?
Well, I was very fortunate. My area of expertise is in evaluating children's educational materials. So I had the great fortune of working on projects like with WGBH Television, Wild Kratts, with the Kratt brothers, kids shows, Word Girl, that allowed me to take their scripts, read their scripts, and test them with kids to be sure that children understood the educational content and enjoyed the entertainment content of the shows. And so I was able to learn a lot about what kids like and how to present materials for children. And that's what I taught while I was at Harvard. And it was an invaluable experience in preparing myself to write children's books.
Wonderful. And Lucas, tell us a little bit, what are some of the responsibilities of a historian?
So I am Hagley's historian. I am responsible for all things Hagley, as it were. So it's my job to know about the people who lived and worked here, what happened on the site. So not only that, but I help give access to the resources available. So all of the records of the DuPont company, DuPont family, whenever someone comes in with a research question, I'm one of the people that helps them find what they're looking for.
Great. And you typically are finding resources for more scholarly researchers. Was assisting for research for a children's book any different?
Actually, no, it wasn't. That whenever people come in, it's all about asking good questions. So one of the things that we do is encourage researchers to ask a lot of questions to help understand what it is they've come in to do research about. And then we try to ask good questions back to help narrow it down and be able to match up researchers with the resources they need to finish the projects. So it was no different in helping Ilona than with helping anyone else who comes into the library.
Great. And Ilona, you've previously written some children's books set in the Yellowstone National Park and at Lewis here in Delaware. What inspired you to write about Hagley?
Personal experience. I was fortunate to live in Wilmington growing up and for part of that time, and I went visit Hagley. And I had very fond memories of the grounds and being able to see the mills. And it's just a beautiful place as well as so rich in its information. And so as an adult, I decided to return. And when I did, I was really impressed with the programs. It had grown a lot in terms of offerings and that for the public over the years. And I was so impressed, but I was surprised when I went in the gift shop that there wasn't a children's book. So that was put the two together and I was off and running. And I was so fortunate that everyone at Hagley embraced the idea and supported the project. And I was just showered with expertise with Lucas and the education committee and anyone, the curatorial staff, just anyone who could answer my questions. As Lucas said, he encouraged questions. He probably got a little more than he had bargained for because we asked so many questions. But there was always someone there who provided fantastic answers. So that's how the book came about.
Wow, that sounds you really found a void and filled that. So thank you for doing that for us at Hagley. The book is described as historical fiction. Can you explain what that means?
Yes. Literature can span, based on history, can span a wide range, starting from being based loosely on a historical event, all the way to nonfiction, which of course should always be absolutely accurate so that every single data point that's presented can be verified. Well, in the middle, there's historical fiction. And in our case, we worked extremely hard to research and learn as much as we could. I used books like this one about Sophie duPont, and I learned about her relationships with her family and her siblings. I also used a book that was fabulous, it's in the gift shop, on Eleutherian Mills and the history of the mills. It was there that I was introduced to Victorine, and I began thinking I would write about Victorine. But it turned out that Victorine was 26 at the time of the explosion. And so I needed children, and because children like to read about children. So instead, I shifted that focus to Sophie and her older sister, Eleuthera. Eleuthera, and she had written and documented the entire event from beginning to end as she remembered it. And I just love the way she starts her document. What I remember about the explosion of 19 March 1818, I was then 11 years old. The following account is perfectly correct. This explosion was also known as the Great Explosion. And she goes on to write that it happened at 9 o'clock in the morning, and precisely where they were in the schoolroom getting ready to study and do their studies with Sister Victorine as their teacher. Wow, well, I was just transported into the time frame, into the event, and I could see it through the eyes of Eleuthera, who was 11, and Sophie, who was 8. And these are, you know, the readers. They're the kids who are going to, that's the age of the children who are actually going to be reading this book. And so perfect. It was just absolutely perfect. And I was so fortunate to have secondary source material and primary source material to be able to understand the story and construct it for a picture book.
Great. So Lucas, back to you. So other than these firsthand accounts, what other resources do you draw upon for your research?
Well, there's an embarrassment of riches, if you will, of materials here, not only on the explosion, but of life during the time period that the book takes place, so around 1818. So in addition to the accounts of Eleuthera and Sophie, we've got letters from other duPont family members about the event, even a letter from one of the duPont company investors back to one of the investors in France, giving an overview of what happened within days of the explosion happening. We've got hand-drawn maps of the powder yards from that time to show what the place looked like, in addition to things like the duPont company pay records, where you can track the damage that was done and the fatalities in the explosion, as well as the wonderful drawings that Eleuthera and Sophie did of what people looked like, what the place looked like around 1818, 1820. So it's well documented. So everything that we threw out there were things that are directly pertinent to the time period. That way we could give a great idea of what it was like to be here around the time of the explosion.
Okay, and this event that occurred on March 19th, 1818, how did this compare to other explosions that happened over the 120-year history of black powder production at Hagley?
So the so-called Great Explosion, the one in 1818, was the first largest explosion, if you will. That wasn't the first explosion in the powder yards. That one was around 1806. So this one was the largest one as far as fatalities. 34 people died. It had also entirely wiped out the upper part of the powder yard. So there were two distinct sections, and this explosion destroyed the entire upper section of the powder yards. That there wasn't, the next closest explosion as far as fatalities was in 1915, where 30 people died. And the next one as far as destruction was in 1890, where 100,000 pounds of black powder exploded in the upper powder yard and did pretty much the same thing. It wiped out the entire upper portion of the duPont factory.
Okay, and Ilona, considering the 120 years of black powder production that happened at Hagley, why did you choose to center your story around this particular event?
Well, it really lent itself to writing for kids. It had a clear beginning, middle, and an end. It was exciting. It had mishaps, And so I could capture all those things in the story, because you're in a picture book, you're very limited in your space. You have 36 pages of story to be able to use. So, and in this book, I wanted to be sure that we had room for all the back matter that was all the nonfiction part. This book is historical fiction for the story, but then a lot of factual information in the back, including an entire list of fact from fiction, so that the reader knows what is fiction and what is actual fact that was the story was based on. So it was so clean in terms of what it had to offer to a writer. And it was irresistible. And as I said, to have Eleuther's actual account, and there are several pages to it, it's very detailed. And other accounts, I really could stay true to history. And that was extremely important to me. I didn't want to be elaborating any more than I needed to. I wanted it to be as straightforward and true to what happened as possible. And this story just was perfect.
And what lessons can young readers take away from this story?
That is a great question. And there are so many, actually. To begin with, the explosion was a huge event that was totally outside the control of the children, but impacted them. And our children today are experiencing a huge event in terms of our pandemic. And so they can automatically universally know what it feels like to have something happening outside yourself. And yet there are rules that you can follow to help yourself survive. And that's what the kids knew, that they were to go to Buck Tavern and there were rules to follow. And just as our children have fire drills, so they learn the rules to follow for safety, they learn the rules, wearing masks, etc., for health, all those things, these children also were taught rules. However, as is so true to human nature and humans, when the event happens, it's very dramatic and it will throw you. And sure enough, Sophie forgets where she was supposed to go. And she ends up headed off to the farm, which is Winterthur, when she was supposed to be going to Buck Tavern. So she gets lost in the story, and that's documented. She actually did get lost. But the one thing she knew, as was most important of all, was to take care of her brother, Henry. So she knew that even though she might not remember precisely, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do in all the drama of the event? She did know, I'm taking care of my brother and I have to be courageous for him. And she does that, and she models courageous behavior. And at the end, she realizes just how much courage she really does have. Now that is partially, nothing like that was documented in terms of this internal realization. It's something I attributed to her. But in having read all about her, I feel like I knew her, and I didn't feel like it was a big stretch to have her come to that realization herself.
Well, it's definitely a wonderful tale of courage. If there is a parent, a grandparent, or a teacher watching, where can they get their copy of The Great Explosion, A Powder Mill Chronicle?
Well, the very first place they should go, of course, is to the Hagley bookstore. But if that's difficult for some reason, they can turn to the Hagley website and get it there, or they can come to my website and get it there. If you live in Sussex County, you can get the book at the Browseabout bookstore in Rehoboth. Or if in Lewis, you can go to Kids Catch, which is the toy store on 2nd Street, and you can get it there. So there are many ways to get the book, and I do hope people will buy and read and enjoy and learn. I learned so much from writing it. I just would love to share that with as many people as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Ilona, for writing this very relatable tale about true life events that happened here at Hagley. Lucas, thank you for all your help with the research, and we hope you can go grab your own copy of The Great Explosion. Thank you.
All right, bye. See you. Bye.